It has been a year now since you began the tennis sponsorship. How has that gone in terms of building the Aegon brand? That was very much the purpose, wasn't it? How do you feel the first year has gone?
The first year was what we called first impressions, to create first impressions. So because Aegon typically has been a business-to-business type operation, we're not well known in the consumer space. So we were trying to get to a point where we created a good first impression, and I'm massively, massively proud of what we've done. We've gone from nowhere to being actually the second most well-known brand associated with British tennis within 12 months. I mean, it's extraordinary. So the brand most associated with British tennis is Robinson's. And that, has been involved with British tennis and Wimbledon and so on for generations. But we're already in number 2, so we're already ahead of, say, Stella Artois, who had an association with Queen's, now the Aegon Championships, for 30 years. So I'm delighted, and we track, as you would expect. We're always tracking things. We use a company called Havas, who do the tracking, and way ahead of my expectations. Lucky in some ways, lucky because we're red and we're blue rather than red, where Stella were red, so we've moved away from the red bit, and that was very, very good and strong for us. So we got that real benefit of contrast, so lots of people picked up on that. Great that Andy Murray won, so that was a real boost as well. But irrespective of that bit of luck in terms of colourways and winners, it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
How do you plan on developing it now then?
Well, we now move into what we call the second phase. So after first impressions, the next phase is basically introducing Aegon. So first impressions were, our colour, corporate colour, blue, how you say our name, because it's not an easy name necessarily to say, and we sort of hence the reason for getting naming rights and so on. But the next bit now is saying to people, well, by the way, this is what we do, this is the business that we're in. So right now, we haven't said to people necessarily that we're in financial services even. So what we now need to try and do is get that message across that we're in financial services. We also want to try and carry some of the value from the tennis into creating a positive predisposition to the Aegon brand. And by that I mean, if you think about things like, you could think about tennis very narrowly and just say it's about hitting a ball over a net, but actually it's about talent management, it's about investing for the future, it's about performance, it's about support, and those are all things that we want associated with the Aegon name, and we need to try and carry those across. So we're looking at the Aegon Future Stars, for example, who we support, to actually carry that story across, saying, well, we're investing in the future. So that's what we're going to try and do. So that this next phase, having moved from first impressions, is introducing Aegon, the values that we have, the approach that we have. The word I've been using a lot internally is substantiation. I think anybody can slap a name on a shirt in sports marketing terms, but how do you substantiate that? You're actually good guys, you're trying to do the right thing. And when your kids come home and they've got an Aegon tennis racket because it's, they're part of the school's program, 3,000 schools have already had Aegon tennis packs. So if we're into that sort of territory, then we can get some of that substantiation across, that we're not just about waving a flag and saying, hey, we're here. We're about, yeah, of course, big high profile blue ribbon events like the Aegon Championships, but actually it's for the it's for the children, it's for people who need access to park tennis, who don't normally get it. It's about refurbishing some of the courts in parks, for example. So that whole broad thing is what we're about, and trying to transfer that across. So introducing Aegon is now moving from the first impression, name, how you say, colourways, into actually we're a brand that has all sorts of strengths and all sorts of depths, way above just slapping a name on a shirt, for example.
Have you seen any concrete evidence that already that it's working for you then? Are there any statistics at all?
Massively, massively. So we have this approach to tracking our awareness, and it's from that approach that I talk about us being the brand second most mentioned in terms of the sponsorship of British tennis. So we've got that. Clearly we've got tracking of things like awareness of our sponsorship, and we break that down between what we call tennis enthusiasts and the general public, and about a third of the general public are actually tennis enthusiasts, and they tend to be very much in our demographic. So they're very often the A, be C1s in the sort of age groups that we would normally perceive to be our customers. So that works very well for us, so that we're tracking that awareness. We're also just tracking through Metrica a lot of the weight of coverage that we get. So as a brand, I mean, it takes your breath away a little bit, but as a brand, you're more likely to hear of us in a tennis context than you will currently in a financial services context, because of the route that we've decided to take, as you point out. It's quite an unusual route, but actually, if you look at 2009, 70% of mentions within the media relate to our tennis involvement, 70%. So what we now need to do is carry that across and say, well, actually, we're not just a tennis brand. In fact, it's worked so well that one of the things we've got to do is almost manage that expectation, say, you know, hey, we don't just do tennis, actually, we do pensions, investment, protection. But that's the sort of metrics that we've got. 70% of the coverage that we're picking up relates to, you know, the way that the tennis is working. Spontaneous awareness, prompted awareness. The prompted awareness thing, it's difficult to measure spontaneous awareness for us because we haven't actually, how do you pose a question, which financial services organisations have you heard of, for example, when we haven't actually now currently really created that bridge between our brand building activity and the fact we're in financial services. So we expect the spontaneous awareness to come up during the next 2 or 3 years, but the prompted awareness, fantastic, and it's sticking, because we did a baseline at the start of the arrangement, so right at the end of 2008, just before we kicked off with the contract 1st of Jan 2009, we did one, following the baseline survey, we did one right at the end of the Aegon Championships at Queen's, and then we did a further dip then in December, because what we were expecting was almost a ratchet effect. So we expect from a very low base, you'd see a spontaneous awareness go up and then drop down off, you know, out of the tennis season, then pick back up. And that's really what we are seeing. But what you're seeing is the drop off in the off season. So in December, for example, was nothing like as severe as it could have been. And with the general public, the general population, if you look at where we got to, we were we built with the general population, so we haven't slipped in terms of prompted awareness with the general population at all since all the activity back in June. So it seems to be sticking, which is great news. So I'm very pleased with that. So a lot of tracking effort goes in, seems to be working. Much too early to then say, well, what's the implications for sales, for example. That comes down the line. So we have to build awareness. You know, we've got to build that familiarity. Then we've got to build favourability, and that's what we're trying to do now. It's very hard to be favourably predisposed towards a brand that you haven't heard of. So hear of us, know what we're about, and then you start to move into the territory of, yeah, actually I quite like those people. Maybe, you know, when my IFA mentions them, I'll be more disposed towards taking one of their products than maybe one of their competitors.
A year in then, where would you say the Aegon brand is? I mean, are you still very much at the start of this process, would you say? Yeah, I mean, you know, we're coming, you know, we're playing in a market where there's some quite big, strong, established brands that put a lot of money into brand building over a great many years. So my expectations were that this is a 5-year journey. I would like to get to a point where we are a generally recognised, if you like, household name by the end of the 5-year contract, by the end of 2013. That's when the LTA deal finishes, and when the deal finishes for the Royal Albert Hall, the Masters that we do there. So I would like to get to a point where, you know, if you haven't heard of us and you're in the general public population, it will be a bit of a disappointment to me at the end of the 5 years. Right now, you know, it's very easy because we look at all these positive numbers to think, oh, job done. But actually it's not. You know, we're starting this journey, and I'm where I had thought I would be at the end of 2010, already at the start of 2010. I feel like I'm about a year ahead. I think we've made much more progress than we could have reasonably hoped for or expected. So I think that it couldn't have gone much better, but equally, you know, we're still starting from a very low base, so there's a big job to do.